Hello everybody. This is a video for those of you who wish to retake the CER. And some of you are pretty close to being advanced or proficient in all three parts, the claim, the evidence, and the reasoning. And I hope everybody decides to take this CER because everybody can retake the test if they'd like to. So what we're going to do with this test is I'm not necessarily going to go through all the answers, but we're going to talk about what you need in order to be successful on this retake. You must watch this video before you retake the test. And again, I'm trusting that everybody will be honest with it. So when I take a look at the top of the CER test, this sentence right here is the most important sentence on the entire page. It says, is mass a factor in determining the amount of chemical energy that is converted when mixing aluminum foil and cupric chloride? So that's what you're trying to answer. Is mass a factor? Is mass, not whether or not chemical energy is being created, but is mass a factor in determining the amount of chemical energy? Now you also had our data. We did these labs in class. We did 3 experiments over the course of one day. And it says here, use the data from our experiments to help you write your CER. So a lot of you, when you wrote your CERs, you didn't use this data at all. Or you briefly mentioned, oh, experiment 1 proved this, and experiment 2 did this, and experiment 3 did that, but you didn't use any of the numbers. You didn't talk about, aluminum foil versus steel wool. If you have to mention those, you may not have to mention both aluminum foil and steel wool, but you have to use this data. I am looking for both quantitative data and qualitative data in your evidence section of your CER. So this data is important. You have to use it. Without using it, there's no way you can get proficient in all 3 parts. It's impossible. Now, the other thing I set you up with right after those data tables is I set you up with the 3 CER, or the 3 scientific principles you have to choose from. Now, your answer might include 1, 2, or maybe all 3 of them. I'm not necessarily going to give you the answer to this, but you have to use scientific principles. And this belongs in the reasoning section, the 3rd section of your test. So a lot of you are still getting confused and you're putting them in the evidence section. The evidence section just wants your evidence. It's very simple and it's very to the point, the evidence section. But I'm not going to tell you which one you need to use, 1, 2, or 3. But look at the sentence at the top. Is mass a factor? And all I'm going to ask you to do is look at 1, 2, and 3. Which one talks about mass? And is mass a factor in determining the amount of chemical energy? In other words, if you change the amount of mass, does the amount of chemical energy change? So is mass a factor? So that should give it away, which one it is. I'm not going to tell you which of the 3, but is mass a factor is key to figuring out which one of the 3 you choose from. So there's a reason why I put the data first, and there's a reason why I put these scientific principles first. Because even in here, if you start to look at mass, where does the mass change? Where is the mass the same? And that first part of the sentence, is mass a factor, is huge determining which of this evidence you use. You don't automatically use all the evidence. You only use the evidence that helps you answer this question. So for your claim, is mass a factor in determining the amount of chemical energy? So your answer is going to be one of 2 answers. You might say, yes, mass is a factor in determining the amount of chemical energy that is converted when mixing aluminum foil and cupric chloride. Or you might say, no, mass is not a factor. That depends on how you interpret the evidence. But the bottom line is, it should be one of those 2. Some of you had a claim that had nothing to do with mass. Some of you simply said, oh, chemical energy is created when we mix cupric chloride and the steel wool and the aluminum foil. Well, that's true, but you didn't answer this question. Is mass a factor? So either yes, mass is a factor, or no, mass is not. But make sure you include this whole thing in your claim. And a claim should only be 1 sentence. But it has to deal with mass as being a factor. Is it a factor? Is it not a factor? Now, when we look at your evidence, Again, you're looking at mass. So when you look through here, where is mass involved? And make sure you talk about some of these things. I want to see numbers in your evidence. If you have absolutely no numbers in your evidence, you're not going to get proficient. And if you have numbers and they're the wrong numbers, you're not going to get a proficient score. So what I'm really looking for from you with a CER is, can you interpret the data? Can you interpret this data to make a claim? Can you pull the data or the numbers out of this data that support your claim, or the evidence out of this data that supports your claim? And then the last part is, can you use the scientific reasoning to link this evidence here back to the claim? Or can you tell me how this evidence supports your claim? So the evidence that we're looking for here, in fact, I'm going to change this right now. I wrote the wrong one on here. So this is your reasoning section right here. Now, your reasoning section, I'm looking for 4 parts, really. Now, this is a third part. You should have your claim. You should have your evidence. Now, the reasoning is going to be the largest section. I'm always blown away by how some of you have this ton of information in the evidence, and then your reasoning is just one sentence. We've talked about this. For your reasoning, I want you to restate your claim. Now, we're doing this on a computer. Just copy and paste it in here. Then I want to know, what scientific principle or scientific principles are you going to use? So you should have one of these 3, 2 of them, or all of them if you need them. You figure it out. Which of the 3 or which of the 2, or are you going to use them all? Which ones are you going to use? And those have to be in the reasoning section. Now, this is the one part that most people miss, is how do the scientific principles link evidence to the claim? So not only do you need to say, this is a scientific principle we're going to use, and this is why. This is why this scientific principle links the evidence back to the claim. Now, again, I'm not going to tell you which of these scientific principles to use, but this is a key, is mass. Mass. Is mass a factor? So read through these and figure out which ones deal with, is mass a factor? Because if you don't get that one right, it's going to be very hard, or it's actually going to be impossible to get a proficient or an advanced score in the reasoning. And then just have a conclusionary statement. You know, therefore, and it might start with and therefore, or there's other ways to word it, but you're kind of wrapping it up. This is your conclusion statement. So this is the last part of the paragraph. You're tying everything in together. And it might be, therefore, according to the data that we've collected and according to the scientific principles, this is why my claim is correct. So hopefully this video will help you out. Again, I'm not going to give you the answers. That would not be proper, but I'm hoping this will help guide you through the writing process. So look at your reasoning. Do you have a claim? Did you mention the scientific principle or principles? And did you talk about how those scientific principles link the evidence back to the claim? Do they have to tell you, you have to tell me why the evidence supports the claim? And do you have a conclusionary statement? If you have all those and they're all correct, you should do very good on this part of the test. So if you're still confused about any of these things, make sure you talk to me as the teacher, and I will help you better understand these concepts. Thanks, and good luck on the retake.